Dragonfolk, today I'm going to be talking about something that may be a little controversial. So, if you don't like to talk with the people on the other side of the fence, you may want to click off of here. Welcome on in, Dragonfolk. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I know I am. My name is Ashen Wings, and you are all of the Dragonfolk that are here to watch me talk into a microphone. So today, of course, right, we started off the video with something pretty crazy. I literally said, if you don't like having discussion, don't watch the video. You can watch the video anyway. I love hearing from all of you, whether it be a like or a dislike or whatever it may be. I want to talk about the things that I enjoy in the TCG space, and this is one of them. Today, we are talking about some pros and cons with Magic the Gathering versus Flesh and Blood. So, Flesh and Blood, of course, for those of you who don't know, is an upcoming TCG that is made by Legend Story Studios, and it has kind of had a weird wave, right? You don't see a lot of Flesh and Blood in LGSs, but you do, in fact, see a lot of really big events in regards to Flesh and Blood, which is real strange considering there aren't a lot of people who are playing it in person from what I can tell, at least in my general area. I have yet to find a LGS within a 10-mile radius of me that actually has Flesh and Blood being sold there, let alone people playing it and at an event of some sort at an LGS. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because it is a game that I am genuinely interested in, and it is something that I do still want to talk about on a regular basis because it may not be one of the top 3 games, but in my heart, it is something that does truly call to me, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you why that is. So the first pro I have for Flesh and Blood, this is really going to be it's a lot of pros and cons for Flesh and Blood in general, and I'm going to kind of compare a lot of the stuff to Magic the Gathering. So if I do make some comparisons, they may not be one-to-one. Obviously, take every one of my words as my own opinion, so feel free to flame me in the comments if you think I'm wrong, but I'm just giving you guys my general pros and cons for Flesh and Blood and what I see in the game itself. So we're going to start with the first pro, which is a very heavy competitive scene. Now, I know I just said that LGSs don't seem to really carry a whole lot of that product, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But from what I can tell, it looks like Legend Story Studios does like to back its competitive players. And that does mean a lot for me, considering that I do like competitive play, and I do really enjoy the fact that there is such a very big focus on competitive play over something than casual play. That's something that Magic the Gathering has kind of moved into. There's a lot more casual play focus than there is competitive play focus. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I know most of my viewership here is a casual player base. Me personally, I like a competitive scene. So getting a competitive scene in Magic, I can only really do on Arena right now. But as far as Flesh and Blood, this gets into the con of everything. The con is that, just like I said earlier, most LGSs do not actually carry a lot of the product, let alone do they do actual events for the game. Flesh and Blood is something I really, really would like to learn. And granted, I have awful social anxiety, so me going to an LGS and just asking somebody who's playing Flesh and Blood if they could kind of show me the ropes is a little hard for me to do. But if I at least knew that there was a small beginner tournament to go on at the time that I could just purchase a Blitz deck and enter with, I think I'd be a little bit more comfortable in learning the rules and trying to figure out what does what, so on and so forth. But with there not being enough support in most LGSs, it's kind of a rough thing for me. The entire point of the game of Flesh and Blood is to be played in Flesh and Blood. That's like their whole concept is you're supposed to be playing with another person in front of you in person. And a lot of that doesn't happen in an LGS scene, at least, for me personally, because nobody wants to carry the product because it's not one of the big three and it doesn't make a lot of sales. And two, why would they set up an event for one game when it's just simply not going to get them people in the door? The Flesh and Blood community, while looking to be quite large as of right now, is not large enough in regards to Magic the Gathering. And because of that, most LGS don't want to take the risk of that, which is understandable. But that just means that I now have to utilize something like Spell Table to play Flesh and Blood, which is ironic, but the option is always there. Another pro that I have with Flesh and Blood is its product prices. So obviously we've been, there's been plenty of different product that's been released with Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering. And because of all this product and the price increases and so on and so forth, you do see a lot of issues in regards to finding what product actually is for the regular average consumer. Flesh and Blood, luckily, has only one product, really technically two products. You have Blitz decks, which are like beginner starter decks of a different format, and booster boxes. Right? Booster boxes are pretty much the straightaway thing. They're utilizing the same booster box kind of concept that was before Throne of Eldraine in Magic the Gathering, which is there's just one draft box essentially, and that is the product you're purchasing. Most boxes now, with Uprising being the latest release, Uprising currently the boxes are right around $75. They did retail for about $60 when they first released, and they've been going up in terms because a lot of it is being opened. So the fact that it's an easier entry point for me to start opening boxes, maybe finding cards that are in there, is very, very tempting. Also considering the fact that the starting point for something like Magic the Gathering is right around $100 for a box, and most of the time you don't even find what you're looking for in there because you have 97% of the cards are worth nothing, and only like the 3%, which is usually the ones you're looking for, are not found in there. So obviously, opening a box still and looking for the card that you're trying to look for instead of buying a single is a bad idea in both games. But at least it costs me $40 roughly less with Flesh and Blood than it does with Magic the Gathering. Now, on the topic of something that is a con for Flesh and Blood is the prices of the legendary and fabled cards for the product. Now, obviously, with every product, there is always a chase of some kind. And Flesh and Blood is no different. There are several pieces of equipment, which you can use for heroes, that are of legendary rarity. And legendary rarity, you can find maybe like, I think, what was the rate? 1 in every 3 boxes or something of the sort, like almost 1 in every 4 boxes. You're almost set to find a legendary. And that's, that is a pretty stiff odd that you could find something like this. And it might not even be the legendary that you want to use for your hero. But the fact that these legendaries are so incredibly hard to pull, they are very expensive. You look at something like Feindal's Spring Tunic, which is pretty much like one of the most staple equipments that you could have for the entirety of the game. The card goes for about $150 at right now. And that's after it's been reprinted 3 times since its original release. So it goes to show that the card is actually really good and is still used to this day and still has a whole lot of use in plenty of different decks, but it's also really difficult to get. And because it's difficult to get, it will have a higher price point because not so many of them are on the market, and it is a high demand item. A lot of these legendary equipments, as well as the fabled cards, which is like the highest rarity that you can get in a set, they go for roughly about $80 to $150 a piece for every single one. And that is rough considering that most high competitive play has you have 4 pieces of legendary equipment as well as sometimes a fabled card, such as a shard or Blood of the Drakai, which I think is the card from Uprising. So it is important that you have those things. And with 4 pieces of equipment and possibly a Fabled card in your deck, high competitive play is upwards of $500 some to get your deck entirely started. Now, the rest of your main deck is not normally as hefty of a price. Majestics can sometimes go for a little bit, but it's normally like $15, $20-ish if it's really that hard to get or really well desired. But most of the cards tend to go for under $1, which is really, really nice as far as a price point goes. Now, I say that the equipment is always the hardest part to kind of hit because it takes a really big hit on the old wallet there. But there is good news, which brings me into our next pro, which is you only need 1 piece of equipment per deck in Flesh and Blood. So let's say you got that Fangdal Spring Tunic, right? You don't need to have multiple versions of it. You don't need to, continue to buy more $150 pieces of equipment to put in a bunch of different decks. You only need 1. So this is much akin to Commander in Magic the Gathering, where you only need 1 version of a card, one copy of a card in your deck. You only need 1 piece of equipment. So $150 for 1 card is pretty good when you can utilize that card in multiple different decks using multiple different heroes. So the concept is really, really nice, and it gives you, that's almost like an investment in and of itself. If you spend the money to get the good equipment, you're already closer to a competitive level, and some equipment that you buy can be used for any hero, which gives you such versatility in trying out new heroes as they come out. So very much so a good thing as far as the pros go, only needing 1 piece of equipment. There are quite a few pieces of equipment out there, so, you're probably highest amount that you're going to spend on equipment alone, maybe like $1,000. But $1,000 to play the game as competitively as possible, you're already paying less than 2 years of Standard. So think about that for a second. There's definitely a lot of good use of these equipments over the course, and the fact that they don't rotate out, or at least there's no word that they're going to be rotated out, it's going to fetch a higher price as time goes on. And let's say you ever want to not use that card anymore, or you don't want to play that hero and you need to get rid of the equipment, you can just either keep it and wait for another hero of the same class to possibly come out, or you can sell it, and that usually fetches the same price that you bought it for, if not higher. So that is always a fantastic turnaround for people who are trying to upgrade their other decks. But just know that while the price point of legendary equipment is high, there is common equipment as well. And common equipment, it costs nothing. Most of the time is given away in these boxes. There's tons of equipment that's pulled on a regular basis. Even if you just open 1 box, you'll get a whole ton of equipment for heroes. So you can always utilize that to kind of learn the game. And then as you get more invested into Flesh and Blood, you can go ahead and start purchasing 1 piece of equipment at a time to kind of make yourself a more opposing threat to other people at the table. Now on to another con, which is actually something that I don't see a whole ton of. At least recently, there's not been a whole lot of this, but it is something that I do expect over time. And that is actually a repetitive meta-ish. As far as competitive play goes, heroes are very popular based on playstyle, and the way that somebody would pilot it is probably more comfortable playing an illusionist than they are playing a ninja, right? But there is obviously still net decking, which is a thing. A lot of people will do this in Magic the Gathering as well as in Flesh and Blood. You take a deck that has won a bunch of tournaments, you buy all the cards for the deck, and then you play that in tournaments at your locals or even in the small events that might be in a big city near you. And therefore, you're essentially just you're a god when it comes to this, because you're playing a meta deck, which may have cost you, right, like $600, but you have it. And if you already bought the equipment previously and you were just like, oh, I didn't know how I felt about this hero, maybe I'll give them a shot. You may not even need to invest that much to switch heroes, which is kind of good in its own sense, because buying an entirely new deck of Magic the Gathering over buying like maybe 10 cards is very, very much so different as far as price point goes. But the meta is going to shift over time. You do see a lot of people kind of changing heroes, and maybe they see better positions, better win rates with certain heroes as compared to others, even though, you know, statistics worldwide may say otherwise. But the good thing is that Flesh and Blood has an answer to a repetitive meta, and that is the next pro we're going to talk about, which is the Living Legend system. So when I first heard about the Living Legend system, I was blown away because I was unsure how they were going to do any kind of rotation. You know, was it going to be they have to wait until like year 6 before they're actually willing to do rotations? Are they going to do the first 2 years of Flesh and Blood and then kind of change things out? What is going to be the concept for their rotation? And what they've implemented is something called the Living Legend system, which is every hero obviously is its own kind of class, right? You play as this hero and you fight other heroes in Flesh and Blood. And so the cool thing is that as your hero wins tournaments or wins any kind of event that is sanctioned, those heroes gain points. And those points are then added to a total. And if a hero hits a certain amount of points over its time, over the time of Flesh and Blood, that hero will eventually become a living legend. I think it's 200 points, I want to say. I feel like it might be a little bit more now. They just did some reworking to the Living Legend system to kind of make characters be available for longer. But this is huge because this essentially allows for, if there's too much of a hero being played due to, you know, meta choices and some people really liking one over the other, or people just wanting to win their locals or just wanting to win in callings or other kind of pro tours, then they can utilize the hero that they want, that they know there's going to win. But if it continues to win a whole bunch of tournaments and it's really just dominating the meta, it will eventually hit the Living Legend status. And what that does is it kicks it out of rotation for Classic Constructed, which is the, you know, the problem is essentially the competitive format of Flesh and Blood. What this does sometimes is also shifts the meta in a way that is more favorable for everybody. With a lot of different heroes available, most people don't like to all just play one hero because the odds of that hero being kicked out of the rotation are so much better. So there's a lot of diversity in metas when it comes down to that. And you get to see a wide array of different playstyles from all these different heroes. Whereas with rotation in Magic the Gathering, you have 2 years of sets in Magic the Gathering standard format. And every September, 1 year of those sets, the first 4 in that standard rotation, get kicked out. And then it starts with the newest 4 plus the 1 new expansion that comes out in September. And that's how rotation starts for that. That, you know, you have to continuously be buying new cards over and over and over again. Whereas with the Living Legend system, you may have to buy new cards, but it probably won't be the equipment that you'll be using, and it probably won't be any of the fabled cards that you have. If anything, you'll have to buy new cards, new attack and defense reactions for your hero. Let's say you wanted to change your hero's, you wanted to change what hero you were playing, then this is a concept that you would use, is you could just buy the cards that you need to make your deck better in regards to that hero's playstyle. And you may not even need to buy any new equipment, which means the deck, to change a hero, may even cost you like $30, $40, if that, depending on any new equipment that's made. So that is a huge bonus. And I really do like the idea of the Living Legend system. The cool thing is, though, is that even though they do become a living legend and they are kicked out of Classic Constructed, that does not mean that they will never be able to be used again, because there is talks, if I recall, if I heard correctly, there is a living legend format being created by Legend Story Studios, and that will allow people to play the heroes that are no longer in Classic Constructed with some of the newer cards that are coming out and kind of give them their own special format as far as heroes that have done really, really well in past metas. Now, I've been pretty even on pros and cons, right? Trying to kind of make myself not seem biased, because I don't just see fantastic things in Flesh and Blood. I do see some things that are small cons to some people. And frankly, some people just don't like the gameplay of Flesh and Blood, which is understandable. If you don't like the gameplay, you're probably not going to like any portion of Flesh and Blood. But, I think the gameplay does have a pretty great standing as far as a competitive game where you are to defeat your opponent. I do really like the gameplay itself as far as the competitive scene and everything about the game goes, with all the different kinds of classes and heroes you can choose from. It's very, very cool. But if there's one thing that I know a lot of Magic players are going to enjoy hearing about as far as Flesh and Blood goes, which may or may not sway you, but I could be wrong, is that Flesh and Blood only comes out with 4 sets a year. 4 sets a year. That's 1 per quarter. And James White, the creator of Flesh and Blood, did this specifically for the same reason that we want Wizards of the Coast to slow down on its production, which is to take the time and connect with a set, to really come together and learn everything that needs to be learned about a set, figure out all the different combinations of cards you can use throughout the meta at the time before they introduce new cards. And you have time to open boxes. You have time to play drafts with your friends. You still have time to pick up cards for your ultimate pit fight deck. There's so many different things you can utilize with having an additional 3 months to kind of like learn about the set. So 4 sets a year. That's what Flesh and Blood's motto essentially is going for, is 4 sets a year. And it seems to be really working out for a lot of people. It gives content creators enough time to look over every single bit of the set, whether or not that be lore or the cards in the set, different kind of deck techs, maybe just even looking at statistics for pull rates. That is enough for content creators to just make great content on it. Not to mention the fact that in those 3 months, you'll be able to take that time to save up some money for the next set to come out, as opposed to having to think you have to buy the next set that comes out every single time with Magic the Gathering, which is at this rate a new set every month. And most of us don't get paid that much. So 3 months of saving up for a set as opposed to 1 month of saving up for a set, that's if you don't pre-order anything. You're looking at a little bit of a better investment into the game if that's something you're willing to do. And then, of course, my final pro that I'm sure a lot of you will see, and I could be wrong about this. I've not held too many Flesh and Blood cards. We did open 2 boxes of Uprising here on the channel, but I didn't notice any kind of pringling or curling in the foils, which just leads me to believe that the foiling, while it does actually look a lot better than some of the Magic the Gathering cards, it's just a better quality in general. Not even to mention the cold foils that look super, super good. But the rainbow foils even look really fantastic. They don't foil the entirety of the card. It's just mainly the art that gets foiled in. And that is subtle enough for people to know that it's still a foil without having them kind of see that whole card pringle and bend and essentially be non-playable in their deck because you can see the little bump in their deck. It's such a pain in the butt to have a pringled card, especially when you pay a lot of money for it, right? You'd at least want the product to be good, but most of the time, it's just not the case. You don't see that anymore with Magic the Gathering. almost everything I've picked up from Magic in these recent years has curled. But Flesh and Blood seems to be holding true to their not curling, which is very, very good. So obviously it's going to, it looks like there's a lot of pros as far as Flesh and Blood goes. And I'm sure there's so much more about the game that I don't truly know. But it is something I've wanted to try out for a long time. And unfortunately, I don't have the play space around me to do that. So if any of you Dragon Folk would like to spend some time teaching me how to play Flesh and Blood over something like Spell Table, I'd be more than happy to do so, right? Let me know in the comments down below if that's something that you guys would be interested in. I'd love to take the time to genuinely learn a little bit and actually play my first game of Flesh and Blood with the people who I care about the most. So while you're down there leaving that comment, also let me know what you guys think about Flesh and Blood. I know we just ran a poll earlier that said a lot of people were not interested in the game, and I'm by no means saying that I'm going to stop covering Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is still very near and dear to my heart, even though I've only been into the game for about 2.5 years at this rate. It's still very near and dear to my heart, and I'm not just going to give up on it because a lot of people are upset. I still love the game. I still love the competitive aspect. I still love the companionship and the community that I've grown and connected with over these years. I love that. And I hope to find that not just in the Magic the Gathering community, but also in the Flesh and Blood community. So if any of you are willing to do that, right, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from all of you in regards to the game. And while you're down there leaving that comment, make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. I hope to bring more content in regards to Flesh and Blood as I get a hold of things. I also hope to continue to cover Magic the Gathering stuff as time goes on in the avenues that I am happiest with, and continue to cover news and all that stuff. So thank you so much for watching. I do truly, truly, truly appreciate it. You guys mean more than you'll ever know. And for those of you who are looking to support the channel in a more monetary way, you can always go ahead and check the description for a Patreon link. I do have some cool little tiers for everybody to check out there. So if you want to support the channel by doing a little subscription, I certainly appreciate it. So thank you so much again for watching. I do truly appreciate your support. And I will see you all very soon. Nerd out.